Let's talk about Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, who also writes as Megan Lindholm. This is the first book in the Farseer trilogy and the first book in the, I think, 16-book long Realm of the Elderlings sort of meta series. It has a very nice cover. I'll read the blurb. The kingdom of the Six Duchies is on the brink of civil war when news breaks that the Crown Prince has fathered a bastard son and is shamed into abdication. The child's name is Fitz and he is despised. Raised in the castle stables, owning the company of the king's fool, the ragged children of the lower city, and his unusual affinity with animals provides Fitz with any comfort. To be useful to the crown, Fitz is trained as an assassin and to use the traditional magic of the Farseer family. But his tutor, allied to another political faction, is determined to discredit, even kill him. Fitz must survive, for he may be destined to save the kingdom. That's not a very good blurb. It's not actually particularly accurate. It's an odd summary. This is a series that's incredibly well liked on BookTube, and is one of those where you can see a lot of people have suddenly got into it in the last couple of years. Not quite classic fantasy. I think this is 94 or so, 95. But slightly older fantasy, unfashionable in some ways because it's a sort of slightly broad, rambling, traditional fantasy in many respects. And I think, I thought I should give it a go eventually. I think it was recommended in one of my What Should I Read kind of videos or whatever. So I've got round to it and I really liked it. My read of it was not what I expected because of maybe different expectations I had of the book to other people coming in. A big thing is that this gets criticised, as do all her books, for being slow, basically. Big build, long development, etc. And lots of character time. It's a character book. In that sense, there's maybe sometimes comparisons to Joe Abercrombie in terms of big character writer, big point of view writer. It's from the point of view of Fitz, the trilogy. And you're kind of like expected to enjoy that and appreciate that, and the plot is secondary. And I didn't really find that at all in the way that people say. Most people, again, most reviews I've seen would say this is a 400-page book, that for 300 pages it's very slow, for 100 pages, and then the last 100 is really good, and that makes the pacing worthwhile. I actually found, if anything, the opposite, that I thought the last 100 pages was a solid but not absolutely top-rate landing, whereas the first 300 I hadn't really found particularly slow. And I think it's because of this. This is just fantasy assassin David Copperfield. This is a book written with certain genre background and expectations, which I guess if you don't like, or if they're not your jam, or if you're not as familiar with, quite reasonably that could feel frustrating. But I didn't. I mean, the fact that this is a first person retrospective from more or less the point of, from Fitz's first memory, framed by him writing some sort of history or something, it's something which set up my expectations, and so I was happy to just meander and amble. When you've read like an 800-page book or 1,000-page book which just decides about 100 pages or 200 pages before the end, the plot's over and now it's time to talk about random things, or there's a big diversion at some point, which is common in quite a lot of 18th and 19th century novels, not Dickens, I should say. You're used to the idea that you can't just expect a tightly paced and plotted thing, and the point is here, there's not weird meanders and it doesn't fall apart. It's just quite quiet and thoughtful. Hobb is another thing people say is that, Hobb is horrible to Fitz or horrible to her characters, maybe again like Abercrombie, and I didn't massively find that. I mean, again, there's a genre expectation. Fitz has a tough time. He's lonely. He feels alienated. We know this from maybe even chapter 1, if not chapter 2, but he never meets his father, this guy, Chivalry, Prince Chivalry, and that's tough, isn't it? And so on and so forth. He doesn't remember his early childhood. He is a sort of outcast in his family. People resent his presence, and there's intrigue and danger, and it's very tough. And people who are close to him don't understand him, or it's almost are counterproductively try to help him in ways that he doesn't think are helpful. All that's by the by, but again, it's very much fits in with a certain genre of Dickens book, particularly something like David Copperfield or Great Expectations, or Oliver Twist. Those books which are about young men growing up, boys growing into men, and this is just in line with that. And so again, it's not particularly gruesome or brutal by those standards. You do feel for Fitz, and there's a really quite careful writing of Fitz as kind of difficult, that you're on his side. And a parallel to this actually is, and there's a few parallels here, to J.K. Rowling. And I think, and I respect Rowling as a writer, I think Hobb is better at the things where I have them compared. And one thing, the comparison is of conflicted and conflicting main characters. I don't mean anti-heroes, I just mean protagonists, young protagonists who are difficult because they're growing up. And she's very good, I think, Hobb, at presenting a basically sympathetic protagonist who is nonetheless sometimes very frustrating. And I think that's an interesting character to kind of write. It's hard to get right because someone can just be annoying, and I think again sometimes people find Fitz annoying. I didn't find him very annoying. I thought as to the plot itself, I think once you understand the genre expectation that this is a slow burn meander around character and world and plot, and that it's done quite artfully for all that, then in that case the plot is quite interesting. Partly because the plot is Fitz growing up. This book is basically Fitz growing up, and this is somewhat framed, and this is not a spoiler in any meaningful sense, but this is somewhat framed by very early in the next book, which I have started, it becoming clear that he's reaching adulthood in some way. He's beginning to hit real manhood, and so I think the point is here that this is the first volume of his life, and so the things that happen, the plot that happens, is about what kind of person it's going to create and how he copes with the slow burn of elements from pretty much chapter 2 or whatever it might be all the way to the end, and the things that also face the kingdom and the way in which this is the tapestry or the background against which this plays out. He is growing up against that background. The background is background, but it offers counterpoint and it offers drama. And yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was very good. Another, I should say, actually, in terms of the things people review about it, they say I loved the characters. Yeah, she's good at characters, I agree. Found it slow, didn't find it slow. Liked the ending, thought the ending was okay. Another thing is people saying Hobb is just a beautiful writer. She's a very solid writer. She has really good moments. She is, I think, simply put, not a beautiful writer in my view. In the way that I would describe someone like Robert Holdstock as a beautiful writer, for instance, or Jean Wolfe. She is a very competent stylist. She's not bland. She has some really wonderful images, particularly of when there is travel or landscapes to look at. That works very well. She's very good at that. But also, there's plenty of quite try-hard images and pushing things a bit too far. And remember, that's the contrary risk, the contrasting risk to the Sanderson blandness, the kind of everything is very neutral so that you can engage quickly, is the person who is trying for effect will sometimes, unless they are really a all-time great stylist, they will fail and it will feel like it's a bit heavy-handed. And I definitely felt that once or twice here, that the style was heavy-handed. That may be a controversial take, but there we are. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it enough that I have, as I say, I got the rest of the trilogy and I have started Royal Assassin, which I will review in time. And what else did I like? What else, apart from, I liked the story of Fitz's life, and I liked the character. The backing cast is good as well, and I think that's generally appreciated. People like, and people who know the book will know, people like Patience and Burrich and Verity and Shade and the Fool are all very strong characters. They are on the whole, very intelligently drawn. I should say also something like Regal and Galen are in their own ways very well drawn as well. That there's this understanding of the grotesqueries of human nature and of strong types, and realizing those strong types with twists and spins that aren't necessarily what you expect. Patience is a really good example of that as a character. Being willing to inject, this is the David Copperfield fantasy assassin thing, because David Copperfield is already half realism, half fantasy. A lot of Dickens runs like that. There's bits of the sort of British English social realist tradition, not the French style of realism, roughly contemporary, but the English realism of observation that you see in some contemporaries of Dickens, like Gaskell, and indeed most famously in his predecessor Austen. But there's also a strong sense of, and you see this in the silly names and the bizarre plots, of a surreal or hyperreal world, something where stories happen, not lives. And there's something going on like that here. We have characters who ring true and are very strong and have a real sense of identity coming into contact or being introduced into this larger than life plot. The world building, I guess, is the final thing to comment on. It's a less important part of the book in one sense. In one sense, it's very important. But if you mean, what's this fascinating broad world? In this book, there is not loads. There are the first hints of stuff that I can see being picked up already in Royal Assassin, which are more important, to do with, e.g., Elderlings and things like that. There's interesting magic. There are 2 or 3 types of magic that Fitz has access to, it seems. The wit, which is ability to bond and communicate with animals, and the skill, the Farseer magic, which is a human telepathy and influence kind of thing, and something else which hasn't been fully defined, but which he is, you know what I mean, it's italicized, and it's things like "I repelled him," and whether or not that is a use of the skill or not, I don't think I know yet, or I have misunderstood if it's already been made clear. So there's these interesting, softish but not completely soft magic systems. There are rules, there are ideas, there are systems. There's a really interesting trip to the Mountain Kingdom on the edge of the 6 duchies, where Fitz lives, and his grandfather Shrewd is the king. And there is, it's fine. There's an interesting thing about the growing danger from the Red Ship raiders out in the islands. There is a map, which, this is the thing, the actual kind of geography and design of the world is not particularly exciting. There's some elements which are, fine, good, but the overall stuff is not in this book insanely exciting. But what I would say is a different kind of world building, which is about texture and environment, is quite strong, or often quite strong, in the sense of her depiction of cold rooms in castles, or decorated rooms in castles, or odd places in the Mountain Kingdom, or places along the road when he's out on a mission at one point. There's a bunch of those things which are atmospherically, environmentally very strong, and that's a different kind of world building which tends towards the realism side of things, rather than the kind of big fantasy world building. It's something which draws you in by immediate sensuous or sensate sensation. I don't know how to put that. but this sense that you're understanding and feeling like you're in the world rather than that you're hearing about an interesting fantasy world. You know, there's a very immediate sensation. And so yes, I think that's, the world building is less important, but the best bit of her style, environmental description, helps create a world that feels real. And that means that the relative lack of, I mean, we're not talking about something with the wackiness and the insanity of a Mythigo would. We're not talking about something with the density of a Stormlight Archive, Roshar. We're talking about something in that sense much more, so far, generic. You know, it's a fantasy realm. Here's some fancy people. Here's some kind of fantasy powers. But what makes up for that is the sense of textured reality of the actual physical places. So I liked it. I am continuing to read, as I say, into Royal Assassin, which I'm enjoying so far. I can see why, because I've started a few series lately. The first volume I started Lyonesse by Jack Vance, and I started the Saga of the Forgotten by Larry Correa, and I enjoyed them both with certain caveats, particularly on Lyonesse one. But I will perhaps get to future books in the future, not yet. Here, very much convinced me to keep moving on immediately, to keep reading immediately. If you've read these books, I would love to hear what you think of them in the comments, and I guess if there's any comparisons for those big character studies and Dickensian fantasies, tell me in the comments. Till next time.